My name is Alex, and for years I believed my parents when they said they couldn't help me with college. We just don't have the money, they would say with sympathetic faces. You're smart, apply for scholarships, take out loans if you have to. That's how people do it these days. I didn't question it. Why would I? They were my parents. I trusted them completely. Growing up, we weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We lived in a modest 4-bedroom house in a nice suburb. My parents both worked. Dad ran his own small business, and Mom managed an office. We took a vacation every summer, usually a road trip to a national park or a week at my grandparents' lake house. Nothing extravagant, but certainly not struggling. When college acceptance letters started arriving, I was ecstatic. I got into my dream school, a well-respected university about 3 hours from home. Not an Ivy League, but a solid education with strong programs in my field. The excitement quickly faded when I saw the tuition costs. "Mom, Dad, I got in," I announced at dinner, sliding the acceptance letter across the table. They both looked genuinely happy, exchanging proud glances before Dad picked up the letter. "That's fantastic, Alex. We always knew you could do it," Mom said, getting up to hug me. Dad's smile faltered slightly as he reached the financial details. "This is quite an investment," he said, his tone shifting. "I know it's expensive," I acknowledged, "but they have a great program and it would set me up perfectly for—" "Alex," Dad interrupted, setting the letter down, "we need to have a serious conversation about money." That's when they broke the news. They hadn't saved for my college education, not a penny. They explained that their business had ups and downs, that the recession had hit them hard, that they just never had enough extra to put aside. "We just don't have the money," Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You're smart. Apply for scholarships. Take out loans if you have to. That's how people do it these days." I remember nodding, trying to hide my disappointment. It wasn't their fault, I told myself. They would help if they could, and besides, millions of students took out loans. It wasn't the end of the world. So I did what they suggested. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote countless essays, and filled out stacks of financial aid forms. I managed to get a partial scholarship that covered about 40% of my tuition at a state school, not my dream university, but a more affordable option. For the rest, I took out loans and worked 30 hours a week at a cafe near campus. College was a blur of exhaustion. While my classmates joined clubs and went to parties, I was either in class, at work, or asleep. My typical day started at 5 a.m. for the morning shift at the cafe before my 8 a.m. class. I'd attend lectures until 2 p.m., study in the library until my evening shift started at 5 p.m., then work until closing at 11 p.m. By the time I dragged myself back to my shared apartment, I barely had energy to shower before collapsing into bed. I ate ramen more times than I can count. Sometimes I'd fall asleep in the library between shifts, my face pressed against a textbook. My roommate would occasionally leave leftovers in the fridge for me with little notes, "Eat something real, Alex," because she worried about how little I was taking care of myself. But I never complained to my parents. During our weekly calls, I kept things upbeat, focusing on interesting class discussions or funny customer stories from the cafe. I never mentioned how I'd had to choose between buying the required textbook for biology or paying my phone bill. I didn't tell them about the time I got bronchitis but couldn't afford to miss work, so I served coffee while fighting back coughing fits. I knew they would help if they could, right? During my junior year, I was particularly struggling. My ancient Toyota had finally broken down, the one my parents had given me for my 16th birthday, already with 150,000 miles on it then. The repair would cost $1,200, money I simply didn't have. On top of that, my rent had increased by $150, and one of my roommates had moved out unexpectedly, leaving us scrambling to cover the difference until we found a replacement. I was barely making ends meet, surviving on free coffee and day-old pastries from the cafe. During a call home, I hesitantly asked if they could help just a little, maybe with my textbooks for the semester or a small loan until my next paycheck. "Honey, we wish we could," Mom said with a sigh that sounded genuinely pained. "But your dad and I are really tight right now. The economy's been hard on everyone." "The business is just breaking even," Dad added from the background. "We're having to be careful with every penny." I understand, I said quickly, not wanting them to feel bad. Don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. Maybe I can pick up some tutoring gigs. That's our girl, Dad said, the relief evident in his voice, always resourceful. I believed them. Again. 2 months later, I was scrolling through Facebook during a rare free moment between classes. A notification popped up. Mom had tagged me in a post, thinking it might be an article about my field of study or maybe a funny meme she thought I'd like. I clicked on it. The image loaded slowly on my phone's cracked screen. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Then it came into focus, a photo of my mom and dad standing proudly in front of a gleaming new boat. Not just any boat, a $60,000 cabin cruiser with all the bells and whistles. The caption read, "Finally got our dream boat. Can't wait for summer adventures on the lake with the family. Blessed living the dream." She had tagged me and my brother like we should be celebrating with them. I stared at my screen, unable to process what I was seeing. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I zoomed in on their beaming faces, trying to make sense of it. They couldn't spare $500 for their daughter's textbooks, but they could drop $60,000 on a boat? A luxury item that no one needed? Comments from their friends filled the post. "Congrats on the new toy. She's a beauty. You two deserve it after all your hard work. Can't wait to come out on the water with you." Deserve it? What about me? What had I done to deserve struggling through college, working myself to exhaustion, eating ramen for days straight, while they splurged on a luxury item? I sat there on a bench outside the science building, tears streaming down my face. A classmate walked by and asked if I was okay. I nodded, unable to explain, and hurried to the bathroom to compose myself before my next class. But I couldn't focus on the lecture. All I could see was that boat, gleaming in the sunlight, while I sat there in clothes I'd bought from a thrift store with holes in my shoes because I couldn't afford new ones. As soon as class ended, I called them, my voice trembling as my mom answered. "Oh, hey, sweetie, how are classes going?" How could she sound so normal, so cheerful, like everything was fine? "I saw your post," I said, cutting straight to the point. "The boat." There was a pause. I could almost hear her mentally scrambling. "Oh, that! Isn't it beautiful? Your father has always wanted one, and we got such a good deal." "You told me you couldn't help me with school because you didn't have the money," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "You let me take out loans while you saved for a boat?" "Now, Alex," my dad's voice suddenly joined the call. He must have been listening nearby. "That's our retirement fund money. We've been saving that for years. It's not the same as—" "Not the same as what? Not the same as helping your child get an education without drowning in debt?" My voice is rising now, years of exhaustion and stress finally bubbling over. "I'm working 30 hours a week on top of a full course load. I'm exhausted all the time I can barely afford to eat, and you're buying a luxury boat?" "You don't understand adult finances," my mom cut in, her tone defensive. "We've worked hard for decades. We deserve to enjoy ourselves a little." "And I deserve parents who don't lie to me," I replied, my voice breaking. "I believed you when you said you couldn't help. I never questioned it, never complained. I've been killing myself trying to make this work because I thought you really couldn't afford to help me." "We don't owe you a college education," Dad said, his voice hardening. "Plenty of kids pay their own way. It builds character." "This isn't about owing me anything," I said, tears flowing freely now. "It's about the fact that you lied. You made a choice to prioritize a boat over helping your child, and you weren't even honest about it." "You're being ungrateful," Mom said, "after everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me lately?" I shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, I've been on my own since I turned 18. The call devolved from there. They accused me of being dramatic, entitled, ungrateful. I accused them of being selfish, dishonest, and callous. It ended with my dad saying, "When you calm down and want to apologize, you know where to find us." I hung up and blocked their numbers. That night I cried harder than I had in years. Not just because of the money, but because of the betrayal. They had chosen a boat over helping me build my future. They had watched me struggle, listened to me talk about how hard things were, and never once considered using that boat money to ease my burden instead. It wasn't that they couldn't help me. It was that they didn't want to. My roommate found me sobbing on our couch. Without asking questions, she sat beside me, pulled me into a hug, and let me cry it out. When I finally explained what happened, showing her the Facebook post, she was furious on my behalf. "That's messed up, Alex. Really messed up." After that, I distanced myself. I unblocked their numbers after a week, but didn't reach out. They called a few times, left voicemails asking me to call them back, saying we needed to talk. I listened to each one, hoping for an apology, an acknowledgement of what they'd done. Instead, each message centered on how I'd hurt them, how disrespectful I'd been, how they deserved better after everything they'd done for me. I didn't call back. I stopped checking their social media. When they asked about visiting for holidays, I made excuses about school and work. I wasn't ready to face them, to sit across the dinner table pretending everything was fine while knowing what they'd done. My brother, who lived across the country and had a high-paying tech job, called me after Dad reached out to him, concerned about our falling out. I explained what happened, and he was quiet for a long moment. "They helped me with college," he finally admitted. "Not everything, but they covered about half." Another blow. Apparently, their "we can't afford it" policy only applied to me. I graduated with $45,000 in student loan debt. They came to the ceremony, uninvited but predictable. They took photos for Facebook, bragged to their friends, and acted like proud parents. I smiled for the pictures, but felt nothing but emptiness inside. When people asked if I was excited to be done with school, all I could think about was the decade ahead of me, paying off loans that my parents could have helped minimize. After graduation, I moved to a different state for a job opportunity. It wasn't just for the career. I needed the distance. We spoke occasionally, surface-level conversations where neither of us mentioned the boat or my loans. They sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, and I sent thank-you texts that were polite but brief. I worked hard, lived frugally, and slowly climbed the corporate ladder. While my colleagues complained about working weekends, I embraced the overtime. Those years of struggling through college had taught me a work ethic that served me well professionally, if not personally. By my late 20s, I had paid off most of my loans and had even started saving for a down payment on a modest condo. Then, 3 years after graduation, the call came. It was a Tuesday evening. I was preparing dinner in my small but comfortable apartment when my phone lit up with my dad's number. I almost didn't answer. We'd fallen into a pattern of monthly calls that were more obligation than connection, but something told me to pick up. "Alex?" My dad's voice sounded different, strained. "How are you, kiddo?" We exchanged the usual pleasantries before he cleared his throat. "Listen, I'm calling because we're in a bit of a situation." He paused. "The business isn't doing well. We're behind on the mortgage, and some other bills have piled up." I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "Your mom and we're wondering if you could help us out, just until things pick up again. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." The irony wasn't lost on me. They couldn't help me when I needed it most, but now they expected me to bail them out? I thought about all those nights I'd worked double shifts, the scholarships I'd written countless essays for, the loans I was still paying off. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice neutral. "About $15,000 would get us back on track," he said, sounding relieved that I was considering it. I took a deep breath. "What happened to the boat?" Silence. "The boat, Dad. The one you bought when I was struggling to pay for textbooks. The one that was more important than helping your daughter avoid debt. What happened to it?" "That's complicated," he stammered. "We had to sell it last year when things started getting tight, but we didn't get nearly what we paid for it." "Of course they didn't. That's how luxury purchases work." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised by how calm I felt, "but I'm afraid I can't help you." "What do you mean you can't help us? You have a good job now. We're your parents, Alex." "I know exactly who you are," I replied, "and I'm sorry, but I just can't afford it." I used their exact words. The the same words they'd said to me when I was desperate and drowning. The silence on the other end told me they recognized them too. "This isn't the same thing," my mom chimed in, her voice wavering between anger and desperation. "We raised you. We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. And then you chose a boat over helping me with my education," I finished for her. "That was your choice. Now, I'm making mine." "You're being petty," she snapped. "This is about your father's business, our livelihood." "And my education was about my future," I countered. "But that didn't matter to you then." My dad's voice turned cold. "So that's it. You're going to hold that against us forever? We made one mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I interrupted. "It was a choice, and choices have consequences." "Is this revenge, then?" Mom asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Is that what this is?" "No," I said softly. "This is me setting boundaries. This is me saying that you can't treat people badly and then expect them to be there for you when you need something." "We're family," Dad said, as if that explained everything, excused everything. "Family doesn't lie to each other," I replied. "Family doesn't watch someone struggle while they buy luxury items. Family doesn't play favorites with their children's education." "What are you talking about?" Mom asked, but her voice gave her away. She knew. "I know you helped Ben with college," I said. "He told me." Another uncomfortable silence. "That was different," Dad finally said. "The business was doing better then. Better enough to help him, but not me? Better enough to buy a boat while I was working myself to exhaustion?" I shook my head, even though they couldn't see me. "I don't believe you, and I can't help you now." The call ended with them telling me I'd regret this, that family should help family, that I was being cruel. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being harsh. But as I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years when it came to my parents. Peace. That night, I sent them an email with information about financial counseling services and some resources for debt management. I wasn't completely heartless. I did want them to get back on their feet, but I needed them to understand that they couldn't manipulate me anymore. They didn't respond to the email. 2 days later, my aunt called to tell me how disappointed she was in me, how families should stick together. Apparently, my parents had told everyone that I refused to help them in their time of need, conveniently leaving out the part about the boat and their refusal to help me years earlier. "They gave you everything," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. "And now, when they need you, you turn your back on them? What kind of daughter does that?" I didn't defend myself. I simply told her it was between my parents and me. "That's not how family works," she insisted. "We all need to support each other." "Exactly," I said. "Support goes both ways. It's not just taking and taking until there's nothing left to give." She hung up on me. The next day, my brother called. Unlike my aunt, he was calmer, more understanding. "They're really in trouble, Alex," he said. "I helped them a bit, but I can't cover everything." "I can't either," I replied. Can't. I have my own bills, my own loans that they never helped with." He sighed. "I know. And for what it's worth, I think it was pretty crappy how they treated you. The boat thing, that was bad. Really bad." "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, genuinely touched by his understanding. "But they're still our parents," he continued, "and they're getting older. Maybe it's time to let go of old grudges?" "It's not a grudge," I explained. "It's about respecting myself enough not to let them use me when it's convenient for them. They've never apologized, Ben. They've never even admitted they did anything wrong." He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, that sounds like them. Always right, even when they're wrong." After we hung up, I thought about what he'd said. Was I holding a grudge? Was I punishing them for past mistakes? Or was I finally standing up for myself after years of putting their needs first? A month passed, then another. No word from my parents. I wondered if they'd found another way out of their financial troubles, or if they were still struggling. Part of me felt guilty, but a stronger part knew I'd made the right decision. They needed to face the consequences of their choices, just as I had faced mine. Then one Sunday morning I received a text from my mom. "We're sorry." Just 2 words, but they hit me harder than I expected. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process what those words meant and if they were genuine or just another attempt to get what they wanted. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. "Alex, this is nowhere near what you deserved from us, but it's a start. The boat was a mistake, one of many we've made as parents. We chose our wants over your needs, and there's no excuse for that. Whether you cash this check or tear it up, please know we're truly sorry. We understand if you need more time or if you can't forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad." I sat with that letter for a long time. The money wasn't the point. It never had been. What mattered was the acknowledgement, the understanding of how their choices had affected me. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I called them. "I got your letter," I said when my mom answered. "We meant every word," she replied, her voice small. "I know. But I can't accept the money." "Why not?" This time it was my dad speaking. They must have put me on speakerphone. "Because this isn't about money," I explained. "It never was. It was about feeling valued. It was about knowing I could count on you." "We let you down," Dad admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so focused on what I wanted, that stupid boat, that I didn't see what you needed. By the time I realized how wrong we were, it felt too late to fix it." "And then when we needed help," Mom added, "you gave us a taste of our own medicine. It hurt, Alex. It hurt so much. But it also opened our eyes to what we'd done to you." There was a pause before my dad spoke again. "We understand. And we'd like the chance to show you that you can count on us now, not with money, but with support, real support." I didn't know if I was ready to fully trust them again. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild, but I was willing to try, slowly, cautiously, with boundaries firmly in place. "I'd like that," I said finally. We've been taking small steps since then. Weekly phone calls, honest conversations about the past. They've apologized multiple times, each time seeming to understand a little more about the impact of their actions. No financial entanglements, just the gradual rebuilding of a relationship that had been damaged by choices and consequences. Last month, I visited them for the first time in years. The house seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. We sat on the deck overlooking the lake, the same lake where their boat had once been docked. Mom made my favorite dinner, and Dad asked genuine questions about my work, my life, my dreams. Before I left, Dad handed me an envelope. "This isn't money," he assured me when he saw my hesitation. "Just open it." Inside was a certificate showing they had set up a scholarship fund at my old university, specifically for students working their way through school. They had sold some property they owned to fund it. "It's not just for you," Mom explained. "It's for all the students like you who deserve better than what we gave you." I don't know if things will ever be completely healed between us. Some wounds leave scars that never fully fade. But I've learned that while I can't change the past, I can control how I respond to it. And sometimes, the hardest response, the one that requires the most strength, is to set boundaries with the people who raised you. Looking back, I realize that college taught me far more than what was in my textbooks. It taught me my own worth, the importance of honesty, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the people who hurt you the most. So, was I wrong to use their own words against them when they needed help? Should I have been the bigger person and helped them despite our history? Or did they need to understand how it felt to be denied help by someone they thought they could count on? I'm still figuring that out.